Hello, my name is Anatoly Motkin and I'm president of StrategEast. And today the topic of our StrategEast Live online panel is Fintech Industry in Eurasia. First, let me introduce our distinguished guests. Natan Avidan, who is founder and CEO of Kernolab and advisor to BigWallet. Asel Botpayeva, consultant on Fintech Industry in Kyrgyz Republic. Otar Gorgodze, head of Fintech&Suptech development in National Bank of Georgia. And Inese Lazdovska, general counsel in Mintos. So one of the industries that received significant acceleration as a result of the coronavirus pandemic and the subsequent lockdown was Fintech industry. Digital transformation plans, which were designed for many financial companies for years, were implemented in a few months. How would the new post-coronavirus financial services industry in Eurasia look like? And the first question I would like to address you, Inese, as you represent one of the biggest and leaders of the fintech companies in Europe, and also your company is a member of Fintech Companies Association, European Fintech Association. And I would like you to outline for our audience what is actually the role of fintech these days, and what makes also Baltic states actually make them the ultimate even hub, fintech hub for the European Union, please.
Sure. First of all, thank you for the introduction and inviting to the panel. It's a very interesting discussion and a very relevant one, definitely. I'm general counsel at Mintos. Mintos is a marketplace for loans. It is based, we are based in Latvia, in the Baltics. However, we do work on international scale already. Our business partners come from a variety of countries. We work with around 30 jurisdictions, including the ones from Eurasia, and are growing quite rapidly. In terms of, I think fintech is a very broad sphere of business. It covers a lot of areas that a fintech can be. In case of Mintos, it's a marketplace for loans, but fintechs are a vast variety. In the association that was recently formed, European Fintech Association, which is based in Brussels, it is a group of fintechs at the moment, which we hope is going to become larger as the time goes, and it represents companies working in the banking sector, working like us in a marketplace of loans area, in crowdfunding. So these are just a few to mention, but the areas of business are different, and there's a good representation of variety. I think in short, the best description I've heard of fintech is that it's a company that has digital front end and digital back end. So you can't really call yourself a full fintech if you only have a digital front end. I guess everyone has them these days, but a fintech, in fact, is a company that is very advanced technologically and is in the financial sector. I think one of the kind of the good things about the existing fintech players in these times is the fact that the adjustment to the change that's very massive in the market is less felt. This is indeed an opportunity for all the variety of fintechs out there, because with remote solutions that are already in place and with advanced technological software solutions on the back end and on the front end, it's the change is not even felt in the fact that the customers can't attend your branch and can't meet you physically. The advanced solutions which already existed before COVID crisis for the identification of the customers. So I think fintechs were lucky not to be so affected by this change that was happening to companies that were more conservative and more reluctant to have the digital solutions in place. So I think this is one of the good things about the fintech industry in these times. It can really embrace its technological advantages. some fintechs are definitely better off than the others. Some have gotten quite to the point with their product and can embrace the moment. Some may be less so and are readjusting as any other business, I would say. So these are definitely interesting times, and it's interesting to work in the fintech industry, including from the legal perspective, because I think one of the things that can be observed not only in the European area where we work, but also in other countries, and the others on the panel might comment there, I believe as well, is that now not only businesses are readjusting, but the legislators are waking up to needing to change the things that maybe they have been slow with implementing, like digital solutions and supporting them with legislation. So this is interesting to watch for me as a lawyer, that now it's like a boost for the legislators as well to push for technological solutions to work better.
Hey, thank you, Inese. And the next question I would like to address to you, Natan. You work from Lithuania, and Lithuania is also Baltic, as we know. And we know that Lithuania is also very developed industry. The fintech industry of Lithuania is quite developed, and is in some means is even a leader in some spheres. So if you may just first outline how does the Lithuanian fintech industry look like, and also what are the limits today for your industry to get developed more, please?
So first of all, thanks for having me here, and thanks for the introduction. Yes, indeed. Recently, Lithuanian government decided to create a fintech hub and become one of the go-to places for fintechs in Europe. And now, since 2019, we have already 200 companies, fintechs, in different spaces: technological startups like identification startups, RegTech startups, insurance startups, neobanks, including Revolut, like big names like TransferGo. Everyone is, innovating here in Lithuania in the fintech industry. It's an interesting combination here because we have a very flexible and communicative regulator here. So this is very important for fintechs to thrive and innovate. They need to have this environment, regulatory environment, which needs to be friendly and effective. Here in Lithuania, you can set up a meeting with the regulator in a week, for example, from now. So they're very responsive, very quick. They're creating sandboxes for different startups, different industries that they're regulating. So I would say now Lithuania is really taking this advantage of being one of the leaders. Actually, it's before the call, I checked the statistics, and we're second largest fintech hub in Europe after UK. So it puts a lot of pressure also on the industry, on the regulator, and on the government, because fintech industry is a risky industry also. We've seen big players fail recently, the Wirecard case, and the big banks also get fined for anti-money laundering issues. So I would say these are the challenges that we're facing right now: how to develop innovation yet to be compliant, especially when you have such a rapid growth on the market, a lot of players, a lot of new professionals, and a lot of new capital investors coming into the market. So this is what we are, these are the challenges that we're facing right now.
Thank you, Natan. And the next question I would like to address you, Asel. And what is the role of fintech under the conditions of small market? And we know that Kyrgyzstan is not a big financial market, but still you have quite developed services that the companies in Kyrgyzstan are providing. So please explain, if you could just outline what happens in Kyrgyzstan and maybe in Central Asia in a couple of words, we would also appreciate it. Please.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to join this panel discussion on the fintech industry in Eurasia. I want to briefly introduce myself and then jump into what's happening in Kyrgyzstan. Independent consultant and researcher. I started working in this sector of fintech just recently because of my interests. I've been previously working in the development agency in the humanitarian assistance with the United Nations. So this transition from sustainable development and ESG matters to impact investing in fintech has been vital, because in the Kyrgyz Republic, there's 20% of the population living below the poverty line. And according to the Global Fintech database, there is a huge demand of 60% of the population which is unbanked. So this is why I found my niche, where I see that fintech solutions could be flexible and they have a capacity to reach to small and unserved groups and provide them with the financial services which the traditional banks have not met. So, and today, currently during the pandemic, it's been highly important because it provides access, safe access to these vulnerable groups. As for the fintech development in the overall in the country, it is at its early stage. First of all, the legislative base is just starting to endorse this idea, the concept, and the working groups are working only now, to implement this regulatory base. Also, as a small market and also as a developing economy, I think it's very challenging for the country to actually push and support this trend, because currently there is no sandbox approach. A lot of small startups face regulatory strict conditions, and they also face the risk of having a small size market and having less access to private equity or venture funds. So they are a challenge. I believe that there is still hope, because there is a talent in the country, but most of these companies, like software developing companies or the individuals, they outsource their services and products. So it creates a gap, a mismatch of supply and demand for the fintech in the country. As a small country of 6 million population, it has a demand, which is small, but they don't have a supply right now. Thank you, and this is shortly about the country.
Could you, what is the interaction between the fintech industry in Kyrgyzstan with your neighboring countries?
With the neighboring countries, I'd say that we have to look first how the economy is, in the overall, is interacted with the neighboring countries. It's not a secret that about 30% of the national GDP is dependent on the remittances, which is directly related to this money transfers from abroad. And fintech solutions could actually ease up this whole situation. I can bring the example that in the past months during the quarantine, a lot of vulnerable families have been cut off from accessing these funds because they've been kept isolated in their areas. They couldn't have a direct or fast access to the banks. And if we talk about the rural areas, they had to travel to the regional centers, which was another challenge for them. When I've been discussing this issue with my friends and coworkers, I've been critiqued that fintech solutions are not a solution for the vulnerable groups because they don't have smartphones. And I've been thinking about it and found that there are good success stories as M-Pesa, where they provided mobile money transfers and microfinance services just through regular phones. And also, it's not a secret that an average smartphone is not really cheap, right? So, but there are cheap ones as well in the market. So it is still possible to create probably some revolving funds and invest into this purpose and kind of ease up the whole situation at the moment.
Thank you, Asel. And the next question to you, Mr. Gorgodze. You work for National Bank of Georgia, and you're responsible for you're head of Fintech and SupTech development. And with all our guests, we have discussed what are the advantages and the opportunities of Fintech sector. And for you as a regulator, what are the threats and in many terms that could be? And the next question also, where do you allow to fintech companies to compete banks, which are regulated, and where you prefer to keep the banks as the with their ability to control some spheres of financial life of Georgia?
Okay, first of all, it's great to be with you. Thank you for the invitation to speak on this panel. So basically, like we have started to regulate fintech. It has been just 1 year, so we are relatively newcomers here. But actually, how we view fintech industry and how we approach it as a regulator, it's probably very crucial. Because we view fintech, we define fintech basically as an interaction of the technology, finance, and regulation. So actually, we cannot see fintech development without regulation, and I think this is crucial point to understand from the very beginning. It does not mean that you have to regulate everything. So there are various regulatory approaches to this. So there are some strategies like wait and see, and then start to regulate stuff. So you have to be able to choose from your toolkit what tools you should apply. But you should never analyze fintech industry without regulation. Which brings me to your question about risks, because essential part of the regulation and why financial sector is so heavily regulated is because it's risk and its external effects on other sectors. So basically, we have to take into account new risks that are coming in. So in the past, we had some instances like where uncontrolled expansion of some fintech industries kind of resulted in some increase of in the risk. So, for example, some of the alternative lending platforms and lenders who we are utilizing fintech technology. So it helped, of course, like as Asel was mentioning, to make some population, some unbanked population banked. But many of them, unfortunately, like they became banked one day, but next day they already became bankrupt. So it is essential, yeah, to balance regulatory approach and analyze what are the risks, because fintech has a lot of potential, but there are also some risks that come with it. For example, like also like. Everybody knows this recent case, this large case that are in the headlines, Wirecard case. So this is also kind of one of the representation of the risks. So, but let me go to the another question that you have mentioned, like what could be its benefits and how we should analyze from the standpoint of the competition. Because fintech brings a lot of disruptions and a lot of new improvements in the financial sector, and we have to recognize this. Over the many decades, so like financial industry and banking industry was quite boring. So there was no kind of innovations, like only innovations, maybe useful innovations like this, as this is arguably like use this example that they come up with was probably ATMs and card networks. Other inventions like structured products, CDOs and derivatives. So all this, yeah, we are inventions, but it ultimately contributed to global financial crisis. But over the last decade, so we see a lot of new inventions coming in on the market, and regulators have to recognize that they have some potential to alleviate some of the problems that we have. especially access to finance problems, and also to enable more competitive environment in the system, because we as a regulators are also facing a dilemma, because as time goes, like our rule books are increasing, so they are becoming more and more complex. Like, for example, just one example, Basel I was around 20, 30 pages. Now it's Basel III is almost 2,000 pages, and it's increasing. It's just one part of regulation, and there are many others like IML and so on. So it is, so new regulations are good for existing firms and existing products. So for new products and new firms, so it is actually bad, because when you develop these regulations, you are thinking already about existing products. You are not analyzing the new products that might come up to the market. So it kind of created protective wall and barrier for incumbents that already have banking business. So it's quite a challenge for supervisor now to analyze where we have this area where we could break up this circle and create some new venues for competition, because some guys who are coming with new ideas, so they should have some ability to compete with already existing firms. And there are new tools that we supervisors develop. Yeah, it has been just 1 year that we have set up this dedicated unit. Yeah, but to promote fintech area, we already kind of set up financial innovation office. Also, we have created recently regulatory sandbox where new ideas and new technologies could be tested. Also, we are pushing for open banking and open API standards, so that other fintechs might come in and use banks for their own business models. And in general, we also promote digital banks, and in the future, like, we probably will unveil new framework for digital banks, where use of banks as a service providers will be encouraged. So we use this area as one of the priorities. So we have to curtail some of the risks that might be unique for fintech firms. Good example probably is cyber risk, yes, because this is very prevalent there compared to the traditional banking models. And also at the same time, we have to encourage competitions, and that's also one of the area of fintech regulations that is there. Like good example of this kind of regulations are sandboxes. Also open banking PSD2 is good example of this, where you basically where regulator promotes business models where fintechs can access financial infrastructure. So it's mix of these two models, like controlling the risk and also enabling new startups to come in on the financial market.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Otar. The next question to you, Inese. It just recently has been, the European Fintech Association has been set up, and which means generally when people set up an association, it means that they have some common issues that they need to resolve together. So what are actually the issues, either regulatory or of any other nature, that they that they create the common challenges for the European fintech companies?
Yes, that's a very good question indeed. We did come together because there are topics which unite fintechs from various different business areas, and our goal is to actually achieve that these common topics are more escalated and our voice is better heard in Brussels at the level European Commission, and at the levels that create legislation for the EU-wide frameworks. The key thing that all of the fintechs in Europe are facing, even though I must start with saying that I think we have in Europe a luxury of having scalable and rather comparable regulatory frameworks in a number of areas. For example, electronic money institutions and banks, those type of fintechs have the luxury of working on the basis of existing regulatory framework, which allows them to scale with ease across various countries compared to some difficulties that other players are facing in other regions of the world because of the lack of this unified regulation. Nonetheless, the level of having the unified regulation is not perfect. So in a number of areas, fintechs are facing the difficulty of having to adjust to peculiarities of regulation of a specific EU member state. And one of the topics which is a very hot one these days is, for example, AML, anti-money laundering matters, and in particular the remote identification of the customers and the methods that are permitted for that purpose across EU. Even though we have a wonderful directive which is implemented in all member states, nonetheless, we do see differences in a number of member states regarding peculiarities that for fintechs result in increased administration costs, in increased cost of running the business, of scaling the business. So the ultimate goal of achieving more efficient, as I would say it, regulation and kind of taking down those barriers which prevent us from scaling without this unnecessary, as I would say, administrative cost. Well, this is something that will increase the competition, that will allow existing fintechs to thrive. And it's not only the fintechs that are going to benefit from it at the end of the day, to be honest. Well, if we achieve our voice being heard and the solutions that we suggest actually being implemented, the benefit will be reaped by the conservative banks and the ones that don't want to be called fintechs. So it's going to be an opportunity for others as well. AML is one of the topics that is very important, and we started out with that, and there's a publicly available paper with our viewpoint on this position paper that outlines the things that we have identified and that we would like to see changing. Nonetheless, we are monitoring the current legislative initiatives at the level of Brussels, and we are voicing the association's opinion regarding our position, regarding the initiatives. AML is just to start with, but it's not definitely the only item on the agenda.
Thank you. Thank you. And Natan, I would like to follow up to you and the BigWallet, the company which is that you work for, and also the Kernolab, the company that develops the software, as I understand, for BigWallet. And the BigWallet is an electronic wallet. And now, you work in Lithuania. But still, we're talking in terms of Eurasia, and we represent here both Europe, Central Asia, and Caucasus. And is this model of fintech companies or fintech models generated or being born in Europe, Eastern Europe, are scalable to other regions of Eurasia? And how it works? And does your company have any experience with this, please?
Yes, thank you for the question. Basically, it very much depends, the scalability very much depends on the regulatory environment. So the main question is whether we, with a Lithuanian license, can operate in a certain region. Would this regulator from, let's say, Georgia, for example, allow us to do so? Would they passport this license? At this stage, there is no framework for that. I know that some regions have been partnering. I know that Uzbekistan has been partnering with Lithuanian regulator and trying to build this bridge and common understanding of the regulations, and maybe at some point even they will passport the license. They will allow passporting the Lithuanian licenses to their region. Although at this stage it is a tricky cooperation. However, I think that there is one interesting angle. It's an open banking, basically the open APIs of banks that it can be a starting point for fintechs where they could cooperate with banks outside European region if there would be a certain framework, or if a certain framework like Berlin Group framework would be adopted in regions outside Europe. So we could kind of connect our fintechs with each other through the open APIs. I would say the main barrier would be the licensing for cooperation, because from the technological point of view, you know, technology is country agnostic. You know, we can go wherever we want to go as long as there is internet there, right? And people who would use our service. But from the licensing point of view, there are challenges, and I think the dialogue needs to be on that level, on the regulatory level. And then if we have a consensus there and we agree that, you know, this is, let's say, AML rules that we comply with, because this is a huge topic, as Inese said, at this moment is probably the largest and most important yet painful topic at this moment, because everyone is learning and improving the best practices. So if we agree on a country level, on the regulatory level, this is the rules we're going to play, and then we can probably talk about passporting licenses, about, you know, some reporting. There are many possibilities of doing that. Sandboxes for European companies in any region, you name it. Just for now, I think the main first step that needs to be taken is dialogue between regulators, and we can see that starts happening right now with this example I mentioned before. But we need more. We need more of such dialogues between regulators, and willingness to cooperate and build common standards and adopt common standards. Then it's going to be very easy for us to go to these markets and work there as a business.
Thank you, Natan. And Asel, I would like to address you a question. If you'll try to map fintech industry in Kyrgyzstan, and what is the proportion of local players versus the international players? And as a follow-up question, for your local fintech companies, and I believe that they exist because the IT sector of Kyrgyzstan is quite developing pretty fast. And we know that always there are existing some role models. For example, for IT parks all across the post-Soviet region, let's call it this way, the Belarusian model of IT park is some kind of ultimate model that people try to replicate, both in Georgia, in Uzbekistan, and other countries. If we're talking about the fintech sector, so what countries are actually the role model for your fintech key players in Kyrgyzstan?
Thank you for the question. For the fintech, the mapping in the country, I'd say the telecommunication mobile enterprises, they are shaping the sphere because not the banks are trying, well, banks are also trying, but these companies took over. So today, all the mobile payments are affiliated with the mobile companies that they own. Previously, they had a problem if you want to use one certain financial service, like fintech tool, you had to have either this to be a user of this mobile provider or a user of certain bank. Now it has evolved. You can be user of either mobile provider or either bank. You just need to have this application. So they are playing the role. As for the other software companies, they are mostly developing the products which are not used in the country. They are outsourced. So I'd say that the map at the moment, the mobile providers are filling in the demand in the country. As for the other stakeholders involved that are functioning in the country and are the members of these IT parks, they are mostly outsourcing outside. As for the model that the country is looking for, I would agree that Belarusian has been one of those, and a lot of members of the Kyrgyz IT park have been cooperating with them and learning from their success of how to coordinate with the regulators and the local players as banks and startups, and how to integrate and advance this process. And I think it's also good for me to mention that the research that I've done with Astana International Financial Center, they are also now filling in this role as integrating, cooperating between these neighboring countries in the region and trying to build these bridges, I'd say, between these companies, between these institutions and hubs where they can share the experience and also probably share the products between cross-border.
Thank you, Asel. And I would like to ask you, Otar, let's put the big white elephant on the table. Let's call it the money laundering. So how do you cope with the actually the issues which are and of big concern of making of the process of money laundering easier through the small private companies, fintech companies, rather than through the proper banks, which are well regulated and under international and local, both national bank control?
IML is very hot topic, yeah. Especially that in countries like Georgia and in small countries, so it's always on the top priorities of the regulator, because it affects not only let's say fintech sector but all the financial sector. And usually what you will see is that risk appetite of the regulators in IML risks is very low. So and as time goes by, I think there is a trend that it even gets lower and lower. This trend we cannot escape it. So if one country decides to go against this trend, so it will be kind of in the outliers. But the good thing I think that is coming in by using these financial technologies is that addressing this risk becomes much more easier, because some of the risks that are usually associated with transactions that are not within the financial sector. So here, like once you have this done with the technologies, usually you have traceable transactions. It is much more easier to comply with IML rules. Only thing that is lacking is need for build up some basic infrastructure, like where you might go through this KYC process, let's say. But I think there are also increasingly openness from the regulator, like to allow different kind of technologies to be used for, let's say, IML checks. So at the same time, like we see that risk appetite towards IML goes down, it declines, like risk appetite is lower and lower, but openness, like to use different technologies for IML checks, like it becomes like there's increasing trend. For example, like you can now outsource IML checks. We are third party, so this is allowed. Also, FATF gave further guidelines on this, and I think there are increasingly wider application in terms of RegTech technologies, which are used for IML checks. Also, some DLT technologies are even used for IML purposes. And good thing is that like regulators open to this, and they allow like allow compliance to this regulation via different technological means. And I have to kind of touch one of the important issues that was mentioned here, like scalability issue. Yeah, because this is especially important for small countries. Because if you are not scalable, yeah, because it's difficult for fintech models to develop there. Because I think in the financial area, only truly international business models that are out there are fintech models, because they are by definition are international. So, and they need very much environment where they could be scalable across the banks within the country and across the countries. So there are various different elements that could help this. Yeah, but ultimately you come to the two main issues. So one is kind of homogeneous, more or less kind of regulation and regulatory openness, and second is to have common standards and common infrastructure. So these two conditions are kind of necessary to have scalable business in the country. But there are many issues also that regulators face. For example, Natan has mentioned passporting. So passporting is a difficult issue, and so it's difficult for regulators to agree on this. Like if passporting had good potential, I think we would have already used it for not only for fintechs but for other businesses also. And yeah, in Europe you could see there is passporting of the banks. Yeah, but it's not usually widely applied. But there are other methods. For example, like we are, for example, collaborating through Global Financial Innovation Network. We are working to design a global regulatory sandbox where fintechs will have opportunity to run their business models simultaneously in different jurisdictions. And if it goes through this sandbox, so its business model could be applied in different jurisdictions simultaneously. Yeah, and standards are also very important. Like Berlin Group standards was mentioned. Yeah, so this I think countries in our region like should aim to adopt the standards for open banking, and this will enable much more easier scalability of the business model.
Thank you. And I would like to ask you, Inese, Mintos as a European company, and I spoke with your colleagues, and I understand that actually the area of your interest is Europe. And I would ask, do you have potential interest to expand beyond the borders of European Union, or there are some more concerns related to this extension, so you prefer to be active only there, please?
Mintos definitely is a company with an ambition. It wants to be a global market player. So even though we are based in Baltics and in a small country, Latvia, in Baltics, but we do have a global ambition. And I think a number of companies and fintechs coming from our region have proved that it's perfectly doable. And us now concentrating and historically having grown in Europe definitely doesn't mean that we're going to stop there. So indeed, we do have interest. If you look at the loan originators which we work with, those already come from a variety of countries. Thus, we already do have experience in working on international scale and can say with confidence that we are a global marketplace for loans. Nonetheless, we do have bigger plans. And yes, Asia, Eurasia as such definitely has a potential there. And I think one of the most interesting things from also regulatory compliance perspective is the fact that in Asia in particular, there's really a developed framework for technological solutions. Well, we can see the examples in the market that that have very interesting business models that are unique and absolutely viable in their jurisdictions. China is an interesting example to take a look at. So Europe is where we feel very comfortable at the moment, and we do plan to expand there, but that's definitely not, I would say, the end goal. However, well, let's not be, I would say, naive in thinking that these times and COVID doesn't affect fintechs in each area they operate. If we look at what's happening on financial markets and in economic growth factors in all the countries, the growth is a bit in a slower mode at the moment, and only very specific areas are growing more rapidly. But overall, the economies are a bit in a slowdown at the moment. So whether the growth plans of fintechs as such, including ourselves, will be as grand as they were planned to be, we will see that. But I think not even these difficult times are not killing the ambition, and it's definitely there.
Thank you, Inese. And I would like to ask you, Natan. We're talking now, like we have 17 minutes left. So we're speaking in general about the policies and the regulations and the common challenges of the industry at whole. Let's take your example, BigWallet, as one of the payment systems. And I would ask you to explain how it works in your region, and actually what are the borders of your region, and what is how this kind of business could be scalable. So it would be maybe for part of our audience, I allow them to touch almost physically some product, and they please have some 3-4 minutes to explain it. So it's not a lecture. Yeah.
Okay, I'll try to keep it quick. So basically, at BigWallet, we've developed a electronic wallet which allows you to transfer money and receive transfers and keep your money on your account, which is an IBAN. Basically, it's that simple. You know, it's very similar to a bank, although we don't have any investment products and we don't issue any loans or any other type of lending products also. So it's purely transactional business. So we do transactions in SEPA region and SWIFT also. So for us, or for the same businesses as we are, which are licensed here in Lithuania as an EMIs, the geography of our operation is Europe. We can passport our licenses to all European countries if we would want to do so. And then it just depends on your go-to-market strategy. You know, if you want to go and expand to France, you can do that as soon as they approve your license there. The regulator approves your license there. In our case, at this moment, we're in the test flight mode. We are open only to our kind of friends and family, which are testing our system, and we're very agile startups, so we're kind of every time improving something and building new features, and very soon we'll kind of be open for everyone, and we will be able to serve everyone at this moment. Although we are already operational, we do transactions in different regions, both SEPA and SWIFT. So this is working. So in terms of geography, as you have asked, it's mainly Europe. But we have ambitions to go abroad, as Inese said. At someday we will definitely go abroad. We see our competitors, Revolut going to Australia, going to United States. Of course, again, talking about fintech, you're talking about regulations, and it's highly regulated business. There is no chance for a mistake. Your license is at stake. So every time we're thinking about expanding to even European regions, they have European countries, they have different regulations. Like they slightly vary from country to country. For example, identification. In Germany, there is they would accept a driving license, for example, as a document. Here in Lithuania, it's forbidden to use driving license as a document. So there are slight differences in any jurisdiction, even in Europe. So adopting and navigating through this regulatory environment is quite a challenge for any fintech there. And we're not an exception. So for us, going outside Europe is even a bigger challenge, although we're, of course, hungry for bigger markets always, you know. And I agree with Otar, you know, if you want to become a successful fintech, and this is what we see from our competitors, you need to be global. I think I covered 3 minutes something, so I will wrap it up.
Thank you, Natan. And Asel, I would like to ask you, actually, from your perspective, when you're looking on Kyrgyzstan and the fintech market of Kyrgyzstan, and we understand that each area and each market and each industry could get developed faster than it's been developed in reality. So for what kind of assistance, technical assistance, financial assistance, international development agencies would you expect to make a fintech industry of Kyrgyzstan more mature?
Thank you for the question. I think it's a bit hard one. I'd start from the current situation. I believe at the moment, fintech solutions could come into this COVID relief process in terms of supporting government, delivering government's social benefits to the remote areas, to those vulnerable groups. And I guess international aid agencies also could play a role in this matter. I can bring an example of UN World Food Program. They practice cash-based transfers as one of their big tools. So I believe that fintech solutions, and particularly in Kyrgyzstan, this mobile payments, they could partner together and be this middle institution that could deliver the product, the service, or the benefits to the end users. In terms of the longer run, I think private equity, private companies, or the local enterprises that have an ambition to grow into this financial sector, they should play the role in this field. At the moment, we can only observe mostly the payments, transfers. We don't have much of lending or investments in fintech or even insurance. Like, it's not even existent here. But the very basic small steps as micro-lending has been done through this mobile payments, but unfortunately during the COVID time, they've been stopped. So I believe in the long run, the local companies should be more involved in this. As an example of this mobile telecommunication companies, they've taken the role, they've stepped in, and they expanded their function into this fintech. Other companies could do the same, but yes, the biggest part as a technology part of the company stays there as a question. So in terms of investments, at the moment, government and the international agencies can fill in, and in the long run, the private companies should be there.
Thank you, Asel. And I would like to ask you, Otar, it's clear that with the time, more and more, the fintech companies will give a fight to traditional banks. And your institution, when you work for any national bank, actually got used to work with the traditional banks. To what degree are you going to protect the exclusivity, let's call it, of traditional banks, well-regulated banks in your country? Or you think that the nature should do itself and what it should do, and inevitably the fintech companies maybe will take over. So what's your approach as a systematic approach, and what actually your vision for a fintech sector in Georgia development? And you know that even the traditional bank like TBC and Bank of Georgia have quite developed digital services, but they're not such, I mean, smaller companies have their own advantages in competing with the big companies. So please, your vision and your approach.
Well, that's very interesting question. Actually, like many try to analyze these trends and predict where we'll end up. For example, like a couple of years ago, there was a report by the Basel Committee analyzing what could be the results of this development, and there are different scenarios analyzed. Yes, one is where kind of fintech companies take over, another is where banks just will transfer this technology and use for and remain as a unchallenged of the competitive landscape. And there are different also scenarios where they are kind of cooperate. This new term competition, yeah, competition model also is there, and also mixed models. So truth is difficult to judge. And usually, like how regulators approach this, that regulators have their own mandate. This is financial stability mandate. So, and we have to safeguard financial stability. But then, in terms of competition, what happens there? So this is not kind of main concern for us. But if you actually look what happens and what many regulators are doing, is that there is kind of maybe slight bias, like to encourage competition, yeah, because in many countries, especially in the small countries, like where you have bank-dominated financial sector, so there is this kind of concern that maybe we should give some chance to other guys also. And not only in very small countries. For example, in UK, so UK was very one of the first who encouraged open banking and basically allowed infrastructure which was built by the largest banks to be used by fintech companies. And PSD2 is good example of this. Also, like these digital bank frameworks, which mainly are built like to lower some kind of barriers of entry to the banking sector is good example is this. So in general, like regulatory approach, I think will be something like this. So bottom line is financial stability and maybe slight bias towards the guys who are kind of testing and coming in with new business models. So that's basically the summary, yeah. But it's very important for regulators in general to stay agnostic. So you should not kind of predict what kind of scenarios could be there, but you should allow playing out of the different scenarios, yeah. So some new technological developments could be risky, yeah, but you should allow this technology to come to the market, maybe in the limited scale, just to identify what are the risks, yeah, because there might be also some benefits that could benefit. And clearly, fintech area is mainly dominated by the startup companies, and they're coming up with different models. And from the 10 models, so even if you have one successful model, this is usually enough, because this one will create a lot of positive externalities that could develop your financial market.
Thank you, Otar. And Ines, for years you've been working for the traditional bank, and now you're working for the fintech company. And it's quite tempting to ask you what the difference that you feel in your approach as a lawyer, as a person with the with your experience for both industries, and what's the feeling and what makes you excited in this new industry more than it was in traditional one, please.
Well, I'm not sure it's comparable in a sense, one versus the other. I absolutely love classic banking, phenomenally interesting area of work for a lawyer in particular. But of course, there is a difference. Well, the slight difference is the fact that in a fintech, you would rarely see guys in suits. Well, you basically work with and for guys in sneakers. So it's as simple as that. It is, well, definitely a a very interesting and inspiring environment. I absolutely enjoy working with people who are seeing more opportunities and a chance to build something, rather than being reluctant to change something. I think this is a trait that very much differentiates those market players, as well as the banks actually, who have gone into fintech and very digital solutions. And there are market players like that in Europe that you can see that they've transformed their businesses fundamentally and have outperformed some of the classic fintechs, as you would say, like startup type of fintechs. So this entrepreneurship spirit and actually agile approach to work, it's very interesting, and it's an opportunity for growth, both for yourself and for myself in my case, and actually, yeah, for the business as such, and to that you can really see the business environment changing. It's very inspiring actually. But what I'm trying to say is that banking is itself, I think, an area which is well, it's not sleeping. It's part of the fintech. So majority of banks are either already there or on the way. So we are in the same boat in that sense. I'm working in a different area of business at the moment, but we are in the same boat with the banks.
Thank you, Inese. And for you, Natan, we have 2 minutes left. Let's say the truth, the fintech is still unclear, too unclear for the regulators. So it's some kind of advantage that you are not over-regulated. If I will try you to tell me maybe 1 or 2 or 3 things that the regulator could make to fintech industry that actually will hang it and strangle it and will actually make your activity impossible. Because sometimes it's happened to insurance companies, banks, with Basel 1, 2, 3, yeah?
I think AML regulations are the ones that are kind of we're struggling with innovating when we are kind of trying to comply with this with the new regulations all the time, because when you're doing a startup, you want to focus all your energy into towards innovation. And in this case, I wouldn't say that at this moment we see some threats from the regulators. No, we see them as partners, and I think they see us the same way. And if we behave, they behave. So I wouldn't say we should name a certain threats or certain mistakes. I think that everyone here, as Inese said, banks are with us on the same boat. I think regulators are also with us in the same boat, and they don't want to restrain us. They don't want to be too strict with us, because they understand, we're trying to fight for our lives here also. And on the other hand, of course, we need to keep this financial stability, which Otar mentioned before. So I would say it's about cooperation, not restraints. And I don't see a certain threat. Of course, any regulation can ruin it. Any regulation that would come in without consultation with us, with fintechs, with our associations, with banks, it can ruin everything. But now we see such a huge opportunity for dialogue. So there is almost zero possibility that something will come out just out of nowhere. We are in this discussion all together. So I would say it's a positive trend, and we're positive about it. So I would finish on that note.
Natan, and thank you to you, Otar, Inese, and Asel for this fruitful conversation. And I hope that we'll keep following the development of your industry, and maybe we'll get in 1 year or some period to discuss the developments. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.